Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Kingdom and its Stories. We're delighted to have you with us wherever you are and whatever time it is that you happen to be listening and or viewing our podcast. I just want to remind us again that the purpose of this podcast is not to bring glory to the person we're interviewing. It's to use their testimony of how God is using them to be Jesus' hands and feet, so that their testimony can inspire us to think more deeply and carefully about how the Lord might use us to better represent Him in our world. And so today we have David Hoefer. David, thank you so much for being with us. We're delighted to have you. And so that people get a little.
Been in the church in some way, shape, or form my whole life. My father was a doctor, retired doctor, but all of my uncles were pastors, pretty much, you know. And in that, I grew up with a firm belief, a firm foundation in Christ, but I wasn't always the best, perfect disciple, I would say. I started out a little bit rambunctious. And instead of going, all through college and all of that, I decided to become a mechanic. So I was a mechanic for roughly 16 years with General Motors and worked hard at it. And I was gifted at it, but mostly I could tell you that God's been with me, whether or not I was in line 100% of the time. I could feel his blessing over my life. I really could. And that carries on even to today, I would say. So as I went through being a mechanic, I became nervous because I was getting a little bit more tired and I was looking at the retirees around me and they weren't in great shape. Their backs were going out. They might have missed a finger or two. And the plan just didn't seem to be working for me. So I was praying about it, and I decided that all of mine, he's a father figure. I've known him since I was 4 years old, and he owned a brokerage, Century 21. And I told him, hey, I would like to give real estate a shot and see how it goes. And he said, David, I'd love to take you in. So I joined him in 2004, 2005, and we had a very good run all the way up to 2008. And then when 2008 hit,
Right.
I had to take a little break. So I did that and then came back in 2016. But this time I was more mature. I had a family. I had 3 children now that I had to support. And instead of relying on my own skill, relying on what I was able to produce, I realized that without Christ, the source of all things, I would not be as successful and I would not have peace in it. So I literally started praying every day for my work. I started praying that God would bring the opportunities and I would do the work that he laid out before me. And not only praying it, but believe it and look for it. That was the real kicker. There's a lot of people in my industry that will work harder and strive harder and find leads and knock on doors and make all the calls and spend thousands of dollars marketing, where I found myself praying. I was also a worship leader for 13 years. So I would pick up my guitar and just worship the Lord
Hmm.
um, at the top of my lungs for an hour and a half before work. All my kids would be in school, my wife would be at work, and I would be in my house just singing as loud as I can.
Good for
And
you.
when I put the guitar down, I tell you, my phone would ring and it would just be out of the blue or a deal that was completely falling apart. There was no saving it. It was done. Would turn a corner and find a way back. And it just that is it almost brings me to tears, but it's like to believe in the Lord and to know that he's in control and that you are essentially an imposter. You're not pulling the strings, you're not making it happen. You just get to watch and do the work that he laid in front of you. To me, that it's better than any other position I've been in my life. It's better than any job I've had in my life. Just to wait on the Lord, watch him work, and then move. And there's examples I can give you, but that's my little elevator speech.
Okay, so how did that background prepare you or create an interest in you to be Jesus' hands and feet in your world?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm not shy about this in any way. We have a large brokerage, and for 4 years running, I was number one in the brokerage. And this year I missed it. I'm number two this year. That's okay. But they asked me, David, what's your secret? What are you doing? How do you do it? And these are, top level agents. And they said, what's your marketing strategy? What do you do after closings? Are you giving extravagant gifts? Are you doing all these things? And I said, no, no. And I just tell them, I wake up and I pray and I worship, and then the Lord blesses me and I do the work that he's laid out in front of me. And I'm not afraid. And they almost laugh in a way, but I know that they heard me. Does that make sense? So, as the Lord's hands and feet, I think it's really important to say this isn't from my doing. This is directly from the Lord, and I can't take credit for any of it. And
Well, okay,
go ahead.
okay. Well, uh, tell us some stories that would give our listeners an example of, how does God use that testimony and how has he used it to draw people to himself?
Yeah. So I'll give you three. I'll give you two good ones and one bad one.
Okay.
So I'll start with a good one. Out of the blue, I had an investor be given to me from another agent. This investor needed to buy 4 homes through a 1031 exchange really quickly. He needed to find 4 homes in 96 days. The agent that handed him off said, this guy is really difficult to work with and you're not going to like it. So I'm just telling you now, prepare yourself. So I spoke with him and we got along great. Him and I were on the same page. He was very particular in what he wanted, but we were quick and I was quick and we were off and running. And then within the first hour, he told me that he was a Christian. And I said, me too. And as we were working together, him and his wife and I, we found all 4 homes, secured them all. But then after that, we started calling each other out of the blue, just asking for prayer.
Hmm.
Or I would be walking and struggling, and I would call him at night, and we'd talk for an hour and a half about what the Lord's doing and how he's, directing our lives, whether we feel it's a blessing or a test or a trial, and my goodness, I've met this guy maybe 3 times, 4 times in person, but I would say we are very close as far as, brothers in Christ. And I'll call him today, and talk with him today. But I was going through a dry spell in real estate, and he called me out of the blue and said, David, we were praying. We came across some money, and the Lord directly told us that we need to bless you with it. So we need another house, and I want you to find it for us, And I was just, when things like that happen, that's the Lord. And I've blessed him. I promise you that he's been blessed through me. But the thing that he was buying is homes for sober living.
And
And the
again, it's homes for sober living.
homes for sober living.
Okay.
It's called Oxford House LLC. I didn't even know this thing existed. I never heard of it before. To me, in my industry, sometimes sober living is has a negative light on it.
Yeah.
They some of the sober living houses that are licensed, they use insurance and Medicare, and they're kind of like farms. They don't really care if they get well or not. They get their money, they get great rent, and they just turn them in and out. There's lots of turnover. I started looking into Oxford House because I just bought four for this new brother in Christ. And I looked into it. They've been around since 1975. But the thing is, their success rate, 82% of the folks that get into these Oxford houses come out and they're well and they're contributing to society again. And the
And
way they
that,
do it,
and how does that compare, David, to other sober living type
I,
of facilities?
from what I've seen, about 6% get well.
6 to 80%?
6%, the other model with Oxford
Right.
House, it's 82%.
Of
And
those
there's
that come out.
reason. Yeah, there's
That-
reasons. The
That's
model,
amazing. Right.
yes. And it's huge. And you talk to these people and you spend time. You spend time with these folks because the people that get well ultimately start opening houses and being the pseudo president of the house. So they are the ones facilitating people coming in. They're the ones trying to help people get better. They're the ones monitoring because that's huge. They're the ones making sure the bank account for the home is solid. And they become very responsible. So, and they're my direct contact. So as I'm talking to them and helping them, you could just see how grateful they are that they're out of this addiction, that they're becoming, more responsible, and they have a real value to the home and to these people that need help.
So,
And
David, let me try to tie this together.
sure,
God led you into the real estate business, and through his work, not yours,
right?
he put you in contact with a recovery ministry through your real estate. And then God has been able to use you to help find other properties to which this pattern of recovery, which has an 82% success rate, which is way above what the normal success rate is. I mean, it doesn't even compare. But he's given you the opportunity to help spread that ministry through the real estate business. Did I get that right?
You got that right. And then I would say in that, when I first started with Oxford houses, I only had the four houses with this one investor. And I asked the main reps there, I said, can I be your real estate agent? And they said, oh, I bet you would love that, huh, David? And almost in a sarcastic way.
Yes, of course.
And I just said, no, I'm serious. I want to help. If I could do them all, I would help you with all of them. And it took 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And now I hear things from the top reps like, David, you are a godsend. We just thank God that you're here and you can help us find these houses. And now they bring investors to me and say, David, I want to connect you with this new investor who has a heart for Oxford House and they want to help people. And now it's not just me working with Oxford houses. Now I'm bringing other people in. And there's so many new connections and so many great stories that I could tell just from
So would
20.
you say this is an example of how God can work through you and whatever vocation he's called you to? It's not even something necessarily that you start. It's something that he brings you into connection with. and gives you the privilege of working in that context to see people healed.
Yes,
Praise the
absolutely.
Lord.
Yeah. And
Okay, now, okay, we're going to run out of time here, and I don't want to lose the opportunity for those other stories.
sure. I'll make them quick. I'll tell you a bad one very quickly. I met a gentleman who was not a Christian. He had a budget of $500,000 to buy an Airbnb, right? That budget climbed from 500,000 to 2.19 million within 2 months. So we couldn't find it at 500,000. He bought a 2.19 million no $1,000 home. Um, Super successful Airbnb, making tons of money, $375,000 a year income. It was insane. And then he came to me and he said, David, I need to sell it. I want to buy a business. I want to sell it. And I told him, I said, okay. And he was not a US citizen. So we had all these struggles to get past, right? He wanted 3.1 million now, 2 years later. And he wanted to sell all the furniture. Big story. But he wanted me to negotiate incredibly hard, sometimes breaking the rules, right? He wanted me to, we have a law called FRIPTA, where if you're a foreign, investor, you have to withhold hundreds of thousands of dollars for the IRS to collect prior to you even selling the property. He wanted me to skirt that. He wanted me to not be truthful about an estranged wife that he had. Okay. So there was a lot of negative, bad things going on. And you could just see it in my face. I was pale white. I was praying about it. I was struggling with it. He was incredibly ruthless, but I got him all the things. And it turns out the person that I bought the property from in the beginning, the same agent, bought the property again at full price. Okay. We go through this whole process of doing things that nobody should be doing or even should be trying to do. It's all within the law, but it's incredibly stressful and incredibly difficult. And at the end, I promised myself and I prayed about it. I said, Lord, I am not going to work with this man ever again. So we finished the deal. And he had told me that I wasn't a hard enough negotiator, that I didn't do enough for him, that I was a inexperienced agent who had no skills, or he just needed a better agent. I was not the guy for him. After we closed, he called me and he said, David, I have two more properties I want to buy. They're both 1.5 million in Scottsdale. Can you go ahead and take a look at them? I want to put offers in. And I said, sir, you and we're not working together anymore. And he said, but why, David? You're so nice. You're always so happy and so nice, and you're always willing to talk to me. Why? Why are you so nice, David? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, sir. I'm not going to say his name, but I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm not allowed to not be nice. I'm not allowed to be what you think I am. And he said, of course that's it. You're a Christian. I can see that now. I didn't see that before, but I see it now. And I said, well, that's great, sir. I'm still not going to work with you though. And here's another agent you can use. And we parted ways. And my accountability friend, my brother in Christ, he's like, David, letting go of him was probably the best decision you ever made. You're going to go on to sell more houses, not dealing with all those headaches and the lies and it's just a temptation of a big sale. That's not something that I'm interested in. So there was some God in there, and then there was some trials. And then at the end, God said, this is the ground I need you to stand on. You need to say your piece and walk away. And I did that. That's my bad story.
Okay. Well, I don't think that's a bad story, actually.
Oh,
In,
well,
it,
it felt
but,
bad during the time.
well, yeah, but what it shows is the importance of integrity in the part of followers of Christ. You're not going to compromise.
Yeah,
And I think that might be an opportunity that God would use in this man's life, to help him to see that there is a difference between a follower of Jesus and somebody who's in it just for the financial gain.
yeah.
So, yeah, and What's your third story?
My third story is my very own story. So,
Okay.
my wife and I decided to sell our house, but we prayed about it and we said we're only going to do it if it makes sense and if God's with us, right? We didn't even have our house listed. We couldn't buy a house without selling our house. And in my world, no seller will take an offer if your house isn't even listed yet.
Yeah.
No way. We found the house and it was one day on market. And my wife's like, that's the one. Let's go look at it. I'm like, why? Our house isn't even listed. We can't buy it. She said, let's go look at it. So we looked at it. We loved it. I'm sitting in it now, by the way. But I called the agent and I said, listen, I'm a successful agent. I'm going to put my house on the market. I know it's going to sell. Can you convince your sellers to take our offer? He said, I don't know, but I'll do my best. So he goes. And sure enough, they take it. Okay. And now I have to list my house and I have to sell it for top dollar. Listed my house. We got full price, but at the same time, we're probably 50,000 above what it should have praised for. So now I'm telling my wife, listen, if it works, it works. We got to pray about it. If it's God's will, it's God's will. So I do my best and we get it to appraise. That's fine. In the midst of this, my wife has some incredibly hard health issues. You know, we end up in the hospital for four days. Went to ER at least 3 or 4 times. Paramedics came to our house 3 times while we're in the middle of this sale. And I'm like, God, what have we done? You know, like, what are we doing here? You're blessing us and you're laying this out in front of us, but now we have all these issues and these trials, and it's horrible. It's horrible, God. And I just kept trusting him, you know, and we got through the medical portion of it. We closed on the house I'm in now, which should have never realistically happened without God's hand. But it turns out that we love this house, and with my wife's medical things in the future, we're going to need a single story instead of a two-story, which we had. And I looked at my wife, and we looked at each other, and we're like, if this medical thing would have happened a month sooner, we would have never moved. If you know, all these little dots had to connect to make this work. And watching him overcome impossibilities just in my own transaction was surprising. None of it should have happened. And I couldn't recreate it again. It wasn't me. But that's my third story.
Okay. David, it's very clear that God has not been your partner, but that you have been his partner. The stories you've told are not stories
Minute.
of something that you initiated, but that God initiated with you. You have 30 seconds to tell the people who are listening, what would you say to them to encourage them to be able to be partners with him?
I would say the first thing, and this is true in my life, this is my testimony, is to fully believe that God is in absolute complete control and that all things come from him. And without him, I can do nothing, absolutely nothing. And anything I do would be worthless and it would evaporate right in front of me, you know, and I've lived that and I've seen that. Leaning on him and trusting, really believing that he will provide you with what you need without fear and without worry. I think that's Christ is everything in this life. It's the only reason to be here. It's the only reason to live. There's nothing else.
David, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your stories with us this morning. God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.